Johnston Atoll. Remote Pacific strips of land carved out of coral reef, chosen for missile launches and monitored test airbursts. I pulled photos. Stripped towers, concrete pads, endless sky above emptiness. A place for experiments too large, too strange, to risk near home. I imagined radar dishes turning against the horizon, capturing noise nobody could tame, until the notes became pencil scratches pressed into files that were later forgotten or buried. And yet here they were again, echoing into my headphones as if no time had passed. The matching numbers knotted in my gut. They weren't vague associations. They were direct overlays. My tapes embedded timestamps, slotted into the file 15 minutes apart, sat exactly under test log entries marked at Johnston. It meant this sound was not just a phantom stored in audio hiss. It was pinned to geography, to coordinates carved into ocean air. The files were carrying more than echoes. They had encoded place itself. That realization left me rattled in my chair, headphones hung slack around my neck. I was no longer tracing curiosities. I was carrying coordinates meant to stay buried. I tried pacing the room to steady myself. Each step echoed too close to what I heard in the tape. Floorboards groaned, subtle, uncertain. When I hit play again, the static followed like a shadow partner, each of my steps mirrored with its ghost pace. My breath grew shorter. I cracked the window, let humid city air in, told myself to ground my nerves. But even then the static walked, dragging presence across both channels, gravel under invisible feet. I called up weather logs from the same hour as those atoll entries. Winds shifting east, low cloud coverage, expected rainfall. Nothing that explained anomalies. Yet the phrase incoherent spectrum gnawed at me. It suggested something beyond their instruments, something that defied predictable patterns. My tape wasn't an accident. It was part of a chain, a hidden ledger of witness. We had detonated above the sky, and the static was what looked back through the split. I rested my palms against the desk, heat rising along my neck. The atoll kept circling back. If the rain tape had marked the start, the second one pointed outward, guiding me across ocean distance to the scar where it all began. My thoughts tangled with dread. The files wanted me there. I felt it in the stamps, in their precise callouts. This wasn't curiosity anymore. It was navigation. Geography itself had been embedded deliberately. Whoever placed that file knew one day someone would find it and be unable to resist. I pulled old at laces, ran a finger across the Pacific, measured distances from mainland ports. Johnston lay alone, abandoned, barely accessible. But something throbbed in my chest when I stared at those coordinates. They weren't inert. They called. I imagined steel towers still humming with residue, silent concrete bunkers waiting under salt air. I imagined listening from that shore, hearing the footsteps not through tape, but through open night. The thought made my stomach clench tight. I closed the machine, but its weight lingered. Even powered down, I swore I felt the static curling in room corners, pacing quietly, observing me through silence. I pressed my palms to my ears, tried drowning it by force of heartbeat. Still I imagined the walk continuing, patient, assured, never once needing permission. The listener who called them footsteps was not mistaken. The file had grown legs. It had walked out from tape into me. I sat motionless in that chair for what felt like an hour. The room swam shallow, my breath shallow. The rain recording had been strange, maybe even frightening. But it stayed bound to its hiss. This one was different. This one was mobile, alive. I realized with clarity I could not stop at hearing. I had to trace it back to its birth. Johnston Atoll. The coordinates carved in ink across test logs, imprinted onto my file. There was no choice. However far, however dangerous, I had to return to the source. The basement smelled of paper pressed too long against concrete. Dust mildew, the faint oil of magnetic tape. I signed the access slip, The archivist slid toward me, her hand reluctant, eyes flicking to the side as though willing me not to notice her unease. When I asked for boxes marked with an incomplete code, she hesitated, lips pressed thin. Finally, she sighed and led me down a corridor where the fluorescent lights struggled. Against shadows, the reels waited on a low shelf, stacked in plain cardboard, each spine marked with nothing more than a single black dot. No catalog number, no reference tags, as though someone had wanted them hidden in plain sight, indistinguishable to anyone not searching with intent. I lifted one carefully. The tape smelled sharp metallic. When I turned it, the dot stared back mute, yet insistent. The archivist lingered in the doorway, but didn't step farther. She muttered that these reels weren't logged, that technically they had no record of arrival. Then, quieter still, she added that no one had ever requested them before. Her gaze lingered on the one now in my hand, heavy as if she feared what happened once it spun. I asked if she wanted to leave. She nodded once and stepped away, the sound of her shoes fading quickly as though distance itself was a kind of relief. The playback machine sat waiting. Old but aluminum strong, with dual arms like hands ready to receive what had been kept hidden. I seated the reel on its spindle, threaded the brown ribbon through rollers, across the head, onto the take-up side. My fingers shook slightly, though I told myself it was dust in the stale air. When ready, I pressed play. The room filled with silence. At first, ordinary silence, the small mechanical whir of tape gliding past the head, the soft click of reels turning. Yet in the headphones, what came through was not absence. It was presence shaped like absence. Pressure, heavy, pressing against invisible glass, as if a sealed room existed within the signal, and I had bent my ear against its wall. My chest tightened with the sensation of waiting for a voice that refused to surface. The meters betrayed it. Their needles leapt sharp, spiking against the edge of the scale, though no sound occupied my ears. It was loud without noise, overloaded with nothing. I tapped the casing. I switched headphones. I cycled through channels. Still they surged, a roar rendered invisible, hammering meters into red, though my ears sat in silence deeper than any I had known before. I pulled the headphones away just to breathe. Air felt thin, stretched. The tape kept rolling, the silence hissing not like static but like vacuum, swallowing. I leaned closer again and let the pressure build behind my eyes. For long moments there was nothing but that weight. And then, faintest of visions, the sense of color I wasn't seeing but almost smelling, a green that belonged not to pink but to aurora. Startled, I stopped the reels, heart fast. I unthreaded tape and looked for physical flaws. Nothing. Only smooth oxide. I opened the accompanying log sheets tucked brittle inside the box. Scrawled in fading pencil, nearly erased by friction, were words that caught my breath. Fishbowl Aurora monitoring. Followed by incomplete numbers, dates without full year stamps. Hasty. As though the note-taker wanted only a reminder. No permanence dot. There were no official catalog entries. No line in the database referencing these reels. Whoever had written those words intended them half-hidden, an acknowledgement to themselves, but no one else. Yet the pencil still burned on the page, fragile but undeniable. Someone had listened, years ago, and known enough to link this silence with Fishbowl, and with skies lit by aurora that should not have been. I sat for a long time before daring to press play again. My hands sweated, but the compulsion outweighed caution. The reel stuttered forward. Again the pressure thick, intolerant, almost demanding. This time I forced myself to stay within it. I let my breathing fall into cadence with the silent weight. Soon I realized there was pattern here, however empty, micro-fluctuations, shallow tremors concealed inside nothing. Shapes within silence. Tiny displacements like a pulse muffled behind walls. The longer I held myself there, the more apparent it became. The tape wasn't blank. It wasn't missing sound. It was holding it back, containing something straining against the reel's edge. The silence was armor, and the spikes on the meter were proof of the force locked inside, loud enough to redline though no ear could yet release it. A chill ran down my arms. I thought again of Operation Fishbowl. Atomic fire blossoming above the ocean, power tearing open sky. If the rain had been aftermath, if the walking static had been echoes, then this was something else entirely. Not residue but prison. Not accident but capture. I shut the machine, but the hum of silence lingered even with headphones pulled free. It pressed at me still, as though once touched it could not be withdrawn. I stacked the reel back in its box, careful with the brittle edge, my fingerprints damp against cardboard. When I left the basement, the archivist avoided my eyes, yet I knew she understood that I had heard whatever I should not have done by nightfall. When I tried sleeping, the sensation returned. The apartment held still air, but beneath it throbbed the same vacuum pressure, the silence that is not silence. Sheets clung to me. The clock's tick folded into the pulse. I thought about those faint pencil notes, the hand that had written Fishbowl and Aurora together. Someone else had faced this decades before, listening alone in some control room under fluorescent light. They had written it fragile, erased almost before it was finished, because they knew what it meant to admit. I cannot answer, but the hum continues, steady, alive. And I know I will follow it because I no longer have a choice. The highway stretched quiet. The rain softened to mist, wipers ticking slowly across the windshield. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other steady on the recorder beside me, its red light glowing faint against the dim of the dashboard. The lead I was chasing sounded thin on paper, a name whispered by someone who still answered phones in grainy preservation offices. A retired technician. Lovefield, they said. He was there that November. The kind of man who had sat among equipment, meters twitching, head tilted to static. I drove thinking he might finally offer explanation, or perhaps only silence, when I pulled into the narrow street. His house looked collapsed inward, blinds drawn, fence sagging. The place of someone who had long ago stopped noticing the world moved outside. I carried the recorder to the porch. I reminded myself not to speak too loudly. Age can be fragile. My knock echoed, then hollow footsteps inside. The door cracked. He looked smaller than the stories I carried. Oxygen tubing looped his nose, machines humming low behind him like tired crickets. When I introduced myself, his eyes narrowed but softened. He let me in without words. The living room was dim, curtains heavy, every shelf stacked with manuals and unused adapters. Machines breathed for him, steady huffs mixing with my own unsettled sighs. I asked plain questions first. Did he recall unusual traffic, cross-feed, anything odd in bands that day? His eyes never left mine, though he stayed silent, expression caught somewhere between warning and resignation. I held the recorder low running, willing even the oxygen machine wheeze to be evidence later. Finally, his hand slid across the table. An index card. Handwriting sharp though shaky, written many years ago perhaps. Just one note, underlined once. 1750 kilohertz. He offered no other explanation, only placed it beneath my palm as though the weight was his too long to bear. I whispered if this meant something formal, an incident log, but he shook his head once and leaned back, eyes dismissing the conversation. The machines filled the air. He would say nothing more. I left almost apologetically, card in jacket pocket, recorder capturing the faint hiss of machines fading behind me. Outside, the rain picked up again, sharp droplets striking metal roof, a cleansing sound after the airless house. In the car, breath fogged glass as I laid the recorder in the passenger seat. I stared at the card. A frequency, plain numbers, yet written with certainty. It was not civilian knowledge. Anyone trained knew ranges, knew boundaries. But written clean, almost reverent, like coordinates. I powered on a small portable radio scanner, tuned dial trembling under my grip. The display wavered. I moved slowly upward, through static washes, up into the range. White hiss, empty clicking, then suddenly there. Between stations, a faint thin whistle, threading high above the noise. Not clean tone, not station bleed. A phantom signal buried like a splinter. It coiled inside my ears, sounded not outside but in. I whispered into the mic, speaking description as I had in past entries. There's a whistle. Between bands, not station, not normal environment. My voice shook faintly. Then, impossibly, the whistle shifted as I spoke. Its tone bent, stretched a shade higher, wavering as though answering. I froze. Did it stop? No, it modulated. Like breath pulled inside a flute when air changes. Behind my own words came the faint echo, like sliding note. Nothing, then almost speech, then sheer whistle again. My chest tightened. Every part of logic begged me to dismiss it as overlap, defect, trick of worn tuners. Yet awareness dredged itself up. Old memories of classified files where tones bent exactly when someone logged them with timestamp. Always described as anomalous, never explained. I whispered again into the recorder, slower this time, enunciating nothing, just a hum. The whistle followed, widening, then dipped low as though aware. It was not mere accident. The sense was direct and chilling. The rain outside softened, drumming faint rows across glass. Street lamps glowed through, hazed yellow. But the interior of the car felt unmistakably occupied. Every shift of tone filling the small metal chamber, twisting through the air like invisible company. I lowered the dial, switched frequencies, returned again. Still, the whistle reappeared, always writing 1750. My pulse thudded against ribs. The recorder captured it all, the fragile note cutting faintly through hiss but constant. I leaned closer to the panel, ear against poor plastic speaker. Something is here, I whispered. Immediately the whistle slid sharp, stung with sudden intensity, then retreated to steadiness. The modulation felt deliberate listening, replying, perhaps mimicking recognition. My mouth went dry. Breath fogged the windshield once more. It should have been enough to terrify me into silence. But curiosity pinned me forward like a hook through skin. The index card rested against the seat, letters barely visible in gloom. I thought of the technician, silent oxygen machine murmuring like witness. He hadn't spoken because he knew. The number alone was his only confession. A warning, or perhaps a handoff of burden. His silence was protection. My attention, a choice. But I made it when I tuned. Already the whistle knew me. Static pulsed, light, then faded thin. I whispered again into the recorder, though my voice caught. It heard me. I should have turned the dial off then, but my fingers clung. My whole body leaned toward the tuneless note, close enough it felt as if the frequency itself leaned back. Curiosity thickened into dread, but the gap between the two narrowed until indistinguishable. And still the whistle held steady, alive, as if it awaited another word. Tonight the rain sounds different. It isn't rushing, isn't heavy, but the gutters outside drip with slow insistence, tick by tick against metal. I have the microphone angled near the window frame. Every droplet lands, each splash against aluminum ringing like a hollow metronome. The recorder catches it, but underneath there is bleed I had not logged before. Faint interference snake thin, slipping through the plaster, hiding in the hum of my own walls. At first, I thought it was traffic bleed, some power line oscillation outside. But when the showers eased and only the gutter tick remained, the hum persisted. I moved the microphone closer to floorboards, along pipes where waterline runs. Pipes responded. At first subtle, but soon clear. A rhythmic pattern, not unlike heartbeat, rolling through building skeleton. I pressed my ear to radiator. Through bone, the vibration felt undeniable. Pulses slid perfectly in pace with gutter drip until I wondered which was keeping time. I sat back, whispering my notes as the rain drizzled. I remembered old assignments where strange signal lingered after catastrophe. Airplane crash sites where radio officers swore their bands echoed with phantom. Morse. Collapsed mines where rescue scanners picked bursts, no longer attached to any beacon. Always shrugged off, yet the results recorded. Thin at first, stubborn when ignored. I thought of my father again. His notebooks filled with tallies of night signals reached quiet bands. Back then I called him obsessive. Tonight I traced the same path. The hum gained depth when I changed microphone placement, dragging cable toward the kitchen. Plumbing rattled, then settled into uncanny measure. I tapped spoon to counter. Tap. The pipes replied half a beat later, same rhythm. As though the house exhaled with me. In the recording, I hear it clearer than my memory allowed. Walls groaning, pipes sinking to unseen frequency. I held my breath. Even silence felt corrected into rhythm. As if oxygen itself bound by loop dot, I clipped sections to play back, isolating noise bursts. Compression sharpened the tone into points. Then I aligned it against an archived JFK speech file I had stored years back. I chose an oration most know, clear diction, recorded clean on reel. I let his words roll underneath the gutter drip. As pulse intertwined with voice, distortion bent his syllables sideways. Ask not, the phrase warped, vowels drowning in low oscillation, consonants flickering. His voice curved unnatural, speaking still, but not his. Hearing it warble unsettled me enough that my stomach knotted. I whispered into recorder that even memory bends once frequency hijacks it. A dog barked 2 floors down abruptly, then whined as if startled. A neighbor's radio switched channel unprompted, carrying faint scratch until muffled with a slam. Then my phone lit bright. Incoming static noise filled the speaker, though no call logged. I turned it face down, let it buzz until gone. Soon after, someone knocked on the wall. Angry, fast. I imagined them shouting about dropped calls, about their lines filling with hiss. I recorded everything but gave no explanation. How could I? If the building had turned conductor, then no one would believe what I recorded through pipes. The air inside grew damp, metallic, as though condensation thickened with charge. I licked lips, tasted iron. The microphone cable vibrated when fingers brushed it, current non-existent, yet undeniable. I thought about disasters leaving behind electromagnetic shadows. How structures recorded events, releasing fragments when aligned right. Was this apartment building one such emitter without history? Or was the event feeding it with sharpness sharper than those past, insisting harder, rewriting space to be vessel? The windows fogged as I breathed shallow. A train sounded blocks away, rumble faint, and on cue the hum bent higher, matching pitch of rail. For half a moment, it resembled chant, layers colliding into cadence. I whispered half asleep that interference itself hungered for rhythm, for partner, always willing to attach itself to whatever cadence existed. The thought chilled me because rhythm implied will dot another neighbor pounded on ceiling, muffled cursing. They must be struggling with wireless cutouts, television stuttering mid-program. But I kept my equipment silent. None needed to know my role, my discovery. The storm outside dulled into murk. Only drips paced steady in gutter. Yet the hum did not cease or taper. It crept deeper, leaning into plaster like parasite rooting. I rewound JFK segment again. His voice, mangled now beyond repair, dragged syllables into moans. Distortion made a new speech never spoken, a leader's plea readden by noise. Once clarity became corruption, I couldn't undo hearing it. My pen dropped. My breath caught shallow. Memory itself was malleable when exposure lasted long enough. I stared at recorder glowing gentle red in dimness. I spoke after long pause. The signal has followed me inside. It is no longer a chase outside walls. It breathes here in my home. Voice trembled with acknowledgement. Still it carried truth. The rhythm never left after that. Every breath I took felt matched, measured, copied back through copper and plaster. The gutters ticked, pleased and endless. The lamp on my desk hummed faintly as I bent over the new stack of paper. Photocopies arrived weeks late through a reluctant agency. The FOIA request should have produced full logs, but what I held were skeletal, lungs missing. The heading read plainly enough: Emergency Patch Calls, November 22, 1963. Ink blurred by time. Margins stripped bare by censors' pens. Blocks of dialogue replaced with black bands. Only fragments survived. Lines of numbers truncated. Enough to show these were real calls. Enough to notice the pattern. The source lines listed there were familiar. At first the digits teased me, half remembered. Then the recognition slammed home, cold and certain. The frequency scrawled by the retired technician on the index card, 1750 kilohertz, echoed right in column 4. The same, my throat tightened. These weren't idle hobbyist numbers. They were official entries tied to the most dissected day in modern record. Yet not a word of these patches survives in mainstream account. Someone kept them quiet, dressed them as coincidence. I ran my fingertip along the page. Where initials should have signed off, there were gaps, half-letters, ghostly beginnings, then void. Different handwriting ended mid-stroke, like the hand itself was pulled away. The absence weighed heavier than text. Documentation is supposed to anchor memory. Here, absence locked truth away harder. I switched on the handheld recorder, breathing shallow into its mic, narrating every gap before me. These voices, I whispered, were filed as malfunctions, erased under the excuse of noise. Saying it out loud steadied me while my chest still churned with unease. Outside the rain had slowed into slick pavement shine. Cars hissed in distance, their tires trailing lines of sound. Within the apartment, the tone in pipes I'd tracked still trembled, softer but persistent. As I read notes aloud, I imagined those long-ago operators on switchboards, arrow lights flashing while voices bled together across wires. I knew that world intimately through my father's stories, through museums of taped calls. But this document's deletions implied the noise wasn't error. It was something recognized, then set aside. Maybe under pressure. Maybe out of fear. I lifted the phone and pressed numbers for a contact, a preservation specialist who still humored my questions. Their voice arrived tired, but genuine. We exchanged greetings, then I steered to the subject. These logs, I told them, list a patched channel on 1750. Is there any internal memo matching? Their breathing paused audibly. A moment later they began. There were anomalies. Let me recall. And then their voice collapsed mid-syllable. Not dropped like a normal call, but dampened. Pressed thin like someone slid filters over the line. I froze, clutching phone tighter. A hum filled the gap. Not static. Not dial tone. More like the whistle that followed me from the card, stretched into cloth. I whispered their name, over and again. Once, faintly, they crackled back, "I can't," and vanished. Then clicked silence. My own reflection in muted handset screens glared pale and unsettled. I set it down gently, as though any sudden motion might shatter fragile remaining contact. The recorder was still running. I listened back at once. My own part was clear. My question phrased flat. Their first few sentences ordinary. Then, as anomaly cut in, their voice became almost translucent, like it existed behind glass. And then the invading hum layered right over, impossible to mistake. The line was not faulty. Something intervened. The air in my small room grew heavier, as if proximity thickened with each replay. I rocked back in chair. Hands rubbed tired eyes. Rational mind reached for coincidence, failing circuits, poor service. But the precision of timing defied chance. The very moment that log's existence was broached, connection sliced. If it was not someone on our end, then it was whatever I had invited by listening too long, too close. Either way, warning had been issued. The window rattled faintly against frame. I turned toward it, half expecting a figure. Only wet street beyond, lamp haloing mist. My body refused ease. Muscles braced for sound to return. At last I spoke into recorder, low but clear. If files erase history, then this machine will not. I'll keep running tape, whatever hourly cost. The hiss that followed on playback seemed colder. I left the papers spread open, black lines wide across their pages like scars. Midnight pressed nearer. Rain started again. Water threaded through gutters, yet behind it, the whisper of interference persisted. Ghost on every wire still present, nearer. The plaza at night feels emptier than any daylight photograph allows. The streets are slick, reflective sheets of black glass under sodium lamps. Wind drops in from nowhere, funneled along the concrete canyons, tugging at sleeves and ruffling loose cables that hang from my pack. It is long past midnight. I set the scanner on the hood of my car, the antenna extended, metal cool and damp beneath my hand. The air carries the smell of rust and wet stone. Rain earlier has left gutters dripping into silence. I narrate into the recorder, voice catching in cold breath. Dallas. Dealey Plaza, midnight sweep test begins. The first dial turn produces nothing but the rough wash of open channels. CB truckers slide past with their low chatter, distorted by distance but ordinary. I notch the frequency upward. A police training net hums faintly, their lines bouncing through repeaters. Nothing unusual yet. A plane crosses far overhead, minimal rumble. I mark the minute on paper, forcing structure onto a moment I know is anything but ordinary. My words come out calm, even though my chest hums with expectation. At half past, the screen on the analyzer flickers. At first, I think it's interference from the lamppost buzzing above me. Then the bloom spreads across the center. Shapes curve, layered arcs bending like fingerprints pressed into glass. They are symmetrical, repeating every few seconds, so neat they cannot be accident. I whisper into the recorder, pattern confirmed. Curved peaks, cycling. Looks too intentional to dismiss. Then the sound arrives, dry, grainy, thin like inhalation filtered through gauze. Not quite human, but not machine, either. The intake of air from lungs that are not there. It rasps inside the static like someone pressed their mouth near the microphone, but never spoke. The hairs on my arms lift steady. I stare at the lamppost. Motion jolts at its base. A stray cat crouches, head snapping toward the same sound, ears pricked. An animal reacts the way I do. The knowledge tightens my throat. I can no longer tell myself it is imagination. I hold the recorder close and describe my own trembling observations. I say the air feels inhabited. The readouts align at intervals, striking me as impossible coincidence. Every spike, every bloom of arc, matches my reference sheet of the motorcade's timeline. Exact seconds, even long after flesh and blood departed this place. It is as if the plaza replays events unseen, triggered by midnight air. I scrawl frantically, smearing ink with damp fingers. The gusts of wind grow sharper, whistling through the underpass. Stone reflects every whistle into layered echoes. The frequencies surge as if fed by it. My headphones rattle faintly, drivers vibrating in rhythm to the blooming arcs. Something in the plaza seems to thrive on resonance. I step back involuntarily, heart racing, breath fogging. I lean against cool concrete, ground shaking under trucks on the distant highway. The sound persists. I keep narrating, though voice breaks higher than I intend. Readout aligns 29 minutes, 30 seconds. Matches sequence of known event, Confirmed frequency pattern holds. I whisper more softly, not coincidence. The word feels like a law passed down in this cold space. As I speak, the analyzer skews slightly brighter, almost responding to acknowledgement. My own admission fed back in signal. I stop speaking to see if it calms. It does. The bloom quiets to near stillness, waiting. The cat darts across the street, then halts, arching its back, ears pinned flat. Its eyes turn toward me, wide and reflecting orange glow from lamps. For a moment I feel exposed, like it judges me for hearing what cannot be heard. Then it bolts, claws clicking, vanishing under a hedge. And I am alone again. Fear radiates down my arms, but duty holds me in place. I adjust cables with stiff fingers, catching rain dripping from jacket sleeves. The measurements obey their clockwork, each curve still identical, each placement against November 1963 tighter than chance. The plaza is not just echoing, it is repeating. Broadcast from somewhere, parsed through structures, or perhaps the concrete itself has become transmitter. I try to reason. Who could orchestrate such a thing? An underground array hidden beneath? An experimental relay left humming decades beyond its life? But how could it continue in rhythm with moments that have no source feed left alive? I pace the asphalt, my shoes grinding grit. No answers follow, only repeated questions scored into my brain like grooves in vinyl. The recorder catches my confession. This feels more like orchestration than memory. As if someone conducts silence itself. My words fill the night too loud, and I flinch, waiting for anyone to step from shadow. But no one does. Windows nearby stay empty, no movement behind glass. Yet I'm not convinced I am alone. I disconnect scanner reluctantly, collapsing antenna, coiling damp cord. The display fades, the arcs leaving phosphor afterglow like prints that refuse to vanish from vision. Temperature drops suddenly, as if the absence of scan has drawn heat too. I slide gear into pack, shouldering its weight. Every small metal piece clinks with nervous resonance. I walk back toward the car, each step echoing too long. Shadows under the underpass reach sideways, stretching even though lamps stand still. My shoulder stiffens. The plaza feels watchful. My recorder runs against jacket, still live. I mutter into its tiny eye. Something accompanies me. Not seen, not silent. Breath fog trails away quickly. Snatched by hard wind dot, by the time I unlock the door, the sense of company has grown unbearable. The plaza's open mouth yawns behind me, resonance vibrating through my chest even as I sit inside metal shelter. My hands quiver. I press record button firmly twice for assurance it continues. My closing whisper trembles steady as prayer. The sweep proves response. The environment itself engages. And now as I leave this place, the silence behind is not empty. It follows. The message arrived in my inbox without fanfare. No subject line beyond a single word. Daughter. The name matched the retired technician I had visited. The man who spoke only through oxygen machines and an index card. I hesitated before opening, pulse loud in the dim light. Her words were brief, typed without adornment. He told me someone might come eventually. Meet me tomorrow, near closing, the cafe at Belmont. Do not bring anyone else. Beneath, initials I didn't recognize. The following evening the cafe was nearly deserted. A bell clattered dull as I stepped inside. Lights hung low, filaments glowing amber with more shadow than warmth. The clink of porcelain sounded far in the back, but the room itself settled in hush. She sat in corner booth, posture alert but not hostile. Short jacket, dark hair streaked pale at temple. Eyes studying every entrance before fixing on mine. She gestured for me to sit without smile. I slid recorder from pocket, set microphone near but discreet, its red light faint between us. She noticed it, then gave smallest nod. Permission or resignation? I introduced myself quietly, thanked her for trusting me. She lifted a small package onto the table, cardboard scuffed, seams taped and retaped until adhesive had lost hold. From inside, she withdrew a cassette. Label yellowed, corners peeling. One word thick in black marker. Firewall. My fingers tingled before contact. She set it down firmly, as though passing inherited burden. Her voice, when she spoke, carried no tremor, only tired steadiness. He wanted to know if anyone else would see what he saw. He wasted years collecting bleed. Broadcasts leaking where they shouldn't. He filled drawers with reels. He thought the interference was purposeful, not broken machines. I noticed how she kept her palms flat, as if to push memory down, pinning it from floating too high. I asked if she ever listened. She scoffed, not cruel, but protective. Of course. I grew up surrounded by that noise. Sleepovers ended with friends leaving frightened by voices sliding through speakers at 3 a.m. He couldn't let it rest. He said this signal chose that day in Dallas because it liked being hidden among so much noise. He said it never ended, just disguised itself for decades. Her eyes narrowed. He called this tape his firewall. Said playing it would prove him right or destroy the listener's nerves. Maybe both. The waitress moved between tables, dropping off lukewarm coffee we hadn't ordered. Steam diffused quickly into air. My recorder caught every scrape, every pause. I cradled the cassette gently, feeling the rough ridges along edges. Too light to hold answers, yet heavier than anything else in that cafe. She studied my face, perhaps looking for doubt. When she found none, she leaned in enough for her final gift. Her voice lowered. He warned, you cannot make it stop. Whatever you hear, whatever you think you've isolated, it keeps breathing. That's why I'm giving you the tape. Because I won't keep it with me anymore. We parted quietly. She walked into night without looking back, leaving me alone with coffee gone cold and cassette pocket, weighted like stone. Rain slicked streets outside, neon signs buzzing jitter against puddles. I slipped into car, rain hammering roof in slow rhythm. Back in my apartment, I hesitated long before pressing the cassette into player. The label stared, stark firewall. I pressed record on my handheld first, steel ritual now unbroken. Then play. The tape clicked and wheezed. At once the rain outside began to sink, its natural scatter adjusting, droplets aligning like percussion disciplined by metronome. I shifted blinds aside. Streams on glass thudded in even cadence. Impossible but undeniable. The cassette carried voices, blurred and fractured, layered as though many channels had bled together. Men shouting, cars sputtering, a woman gasping. But overlays refused chronology. It was as though multiple versions of that day were broadcasting over each other, centuries stacked atop second. One voice would half emerge, hold your fire, then another crossfaded, laughing, coughing, boots scraping pavement. My breath sped, trapped by multiplicity. As I leaned closer, each replay offered new fragments the last had not. Infinite doors opening the same hallway. The hum I knew sat beneath it all, steady and cold, still matching the gutter drip beyond my windows. Memory of the plaza tumbled into present. I whispered into recorder, words tripping. Moments are concurrent. It doesn't slide linear. Saying it aloud made skin crawl, because his daughter had been correct. The broadcast was alive, bending rain, bending time. The tape stuck briefly, warbling high pitch, stretching one cry into long metallic moan. I jerked back as though struck. But when reels caught again, new layer pressed through. My ears swore it was someone whispering directly into the tape head. A fragmented phrase, nothing clear, but cadence close to language. Between words, the rainfall on the glass climbed to unnatural precision, drumming syncopated with voice. The atmosphere thickened until I couldn't tell where my apartment ended or recording began. My head swam, all air turned copper. I reached to stop the deck, but hesitation caught. My father, my own chasing nights, my vow to preserve, all of it pressed me still. And then, beneath noise, a final clear sound. Her voice. Not in cafe, not memory, but recorded on this tape I had yet to rewind. 4 words, whispered harsh, captured against hiss. It never shuts off. The cassette waited on my desk all day, the word firewall staring at me each time I turned my head. By nightfall, I could not ignore it any longer. I dimmed the lamp until only the recorder light marked the table. My studio was cramped but quiet, walls lined with foam, gear stacked like miniature towers bristling with cables. Each familiar machine felt suddenly ominous. I pulled the drawer open, set the cassette in my palm, and forced breath steady before threading it through the deck. The rollers gripped. Spindles turned slow, whining. The tape sputtered, a soft cough before unraveling into sound. It emerged broken. Voices fractured like glass dissolving in water. Consonants melted, vowels snapped brittle. The room filled with remnants of speech bent and scorched until they landed heavy and meaningless. Underneath, too steady to ignore, was breathing. Not mine. A constant exhalation hiss, sometimes shallow, sometimes drawn too long, crowding the room as if a body leaned over my shoulder. I froze in chair, counting my own chest inflations to prove it was external. Each time, the hiss declined or swelled in response, confirming my fear. The reels creaked forward. I forced myself to keep narrating into auxiliary recorder, my voice rare and thin. I described every fragment as proof for tomorrow's weary mind that tonight wasn't hallucination. 15 seconds and I shifted feed out through analyzer, spectrum graph blooming pale blue on screen. Minute ridges scrambled across, at first only static bars, but gradually something uncanny carved its way forward. The bed of noise settled into patterns not random. Streaks mapped out angles, grids, streets. I leaned closer until nose almost touched monitor. The noise is a scan, I whispered, disbelief thick. I traced shapes with finger, dragging point along ridges. A square, a curved road. Lines tight at one end, widening out at right. My throat closed hard, pulse bursting loud in ears. I adjusted scaling to cross-check. The image held. The static formed structure. A map etched in frequency. Dallas, downtown precisely. And within it, clear as any diagram, the bounds of Dealey Plaza. The tape was encoding space itself. I felt no triumph, only dread. Every inch of the plaza, embedded inside cassette hiss, like a body cut into sonic slices, then laid across time. The breathing intensified until headphones crackled gentle distortion. My gain knob pulsed almost without touch. I switched to another channel to measure. The spectrogram pulsed sharper, like heartbeat now pumping across screen. This is not artifact, I spoke again, mouth dry. It is cartography in sound. The tape holds the shape of where it began. For the first time in weeks, sensation clawed cold into my gut. I was trespassing. This wasn't meant for listener. This was inscription, a preservation no eyes were designed to parse. My skin crawled hot then chilled. I forced hands to keep calibrating because compulsion burned stronger than reason. Minute layered with minute. As the tape unraveled, sectors of the plaza grew sharper, pulled into clarity until streamer lines intersected like pencil planning. I saw the underpass traced, the rise of grassy slope smoothed in static shading. Every iconic position of that afternoon drawn in pulses unknowable to crowd or witness then. The meters leapt, swinging hard against redline. I checked cables, certain short had invaded. No, all plugged neat. The cassette's own feed was surging. The deck rumbled under weight of energy no domestic machine should carry. Gain spiked. Displays strobed. My chest twitched with sympathetic rhythm, as though equipment had looped itself through my body. Breath accelerated, lungs dragging shallow. I thought of shutting it down. Yet eyes remained hypnotized by screen showing Plaza's body inside sound. I couldn't deny documentation when reality itself cross-checked. I narrated fevered. Side B of Reel 3 is not voice alone. It is terrain. At least 1 square mile embedded. My hand trembled so hard on paper, I carved holes through notes. A hollow thump cracked wall to my left. At first I panicked, convinced it was part of recording bleeding outward. But then it came again, louder, more deliberate. My neighbor. An angry fist. The muffled shout filtered through drywall. They had heard something through their phone lines, or seeping from my speakers, perhaps transmitted invisibly into their rooms. Shame spiked into my fear. I yanked headphones off. The moment of silence felt heavier than sound. Tape still spun, voice fragments coughing through air. Then my deck screamed overload, meters clipped in permanent crimson, needles pegged against max. Speakers fizzed. A shock bit my finger when I brushed control panel. I cursed under breath, levered switch down. Power clicked. Wheels slowed reluctant, then still silence returned. Rain clawed quietly against window, as if mocking symphony just erased. I breathed like drowning man coming up too late. For first time since this search began, I stopped playback before machine stopped me. My hands gripped desk edge hard enough to hurt, refusing to reach cassette again. The relay stations look forgotten. Rust streaks down their walls, chain link leaning with age. You would think they no longer matter. Yet the logs led me here, a row of squat buildings along service roads where few lights stay on past midnight. I parked 2 streets away the first night, windows fogging, thermos slipping in one hand while my other held the scanner. The rain has not stopped all week. It falls light, then hard, then light again, adjusting its rhythm like accompaniment. Water beads against windshield, streaks down, and the static of drizzle seems to carry into my receiver itself. The portable scanner whispers, an intimate sound, hushed but insistent. Peaks appear at intervals so predictable, I take them at first for equipment diagnostics, as though my unit is repeating fault cycles. But the printout from Analyzer confirms they're real. Every 15 minutes, signal surges, crests too smooth to be chance, then slips back under, identical to sonar pings bouncing from walls unseen. I describe it into recorder, bursts repeating, equal spacing. Carrying something hidden. My own voice sounds falsely calm, compared to pulse and chest through long night. I sip coffee burnt thick at bottom of flask. Rain thrums background reminder of distance I have not traveled, years lining up behind tonight. Each burst lands with tick-mark precision. Out of boredom or desperation, I align them against timeline notes and clipped binder at my side. Then nausea tightens throat as pattern emerges. The intervals match airing of news ticks on Assassination Day. The bursts correspond to network bulletin timecodes from November 1963. This can't be accident. Decades out, yet system still bleeds at same calendar moments, repeating match for match. I whisper that conclusion into tape and hear in my own breath how little comfort it carries. Hoaxes are messy. Mistakes are messy. This is design stretched wide, resilient as steel net. Whatever pulses here, it is not amateur mischief cobbled in basements. It is lattice work, long enduring. A frequency mapping history across continents. I change parking position second night. Deeper shadow, closer sightline to doors of relay station. Windows cracked slightly, rain pattering roof like measured drum. I cradle scanner against ribs, listening through low hiss. Bursts come again, right on their invisible clock. Yellow meter flicks upward. Paper steadily feeds through printhead. Another stack of confirmation notes. Each time, I imagine lines inside building glowing faint. Empty cabinets channeling resonance. Hours pass in silence, broken only by splashing tires of distant trucks. Coffee is gone. Air smells of wet rubber and spilled asphalt. My reflection swims faint in windshield glass. Eyes hollow, lips darkened with caffeine residue. Recorder keeps red eye open. I murmur into it how repeats refuse collapse, how they hold against fatigue, how this breathless stackout slides further from journalism toward obsession. Rain answers without judgment. Then near dawn, when brain hangs half asleep, scanner hiccups. A new sound rides channel. Not burst, not pulse. My body stiffens, grip tightening on knobs. I lean close, ear pressed hard against speaker grill. What emerges is not foreign voice. It is my own. At first, it's muffled, threads of syllables blurred, like distant echo down stairwell. But cadence is undeniable. The pitch of throat, the scrape of consonants, the pause after thought, it belongs to me. Except I have not spoken those words yet. I freeze, mouth tight. Then from speaker comes half a phrase that seconds later spills unbidden from my lips in disbelief. Recording is folded forward, playing fragments of me before I utter them. I pull microphone closer, hand shaking. The signal anticipates. I catch my reflection, even as phrase feeds back in strange synchrony. Voice inside machine repeating me in delay, not by seconds, but by future. It shouldn't be possible. Breath fogs windshield heavy. Equipment rattles faint against dashboard as pulse escalates. I keep speaking, though throat dries desert tight. This network is not broadcasting. It is predicting. The recorder hums as though pleased by confession. Behind my own stressed syllables runs faint copy, advanced and too near. When silence returns, I collapse against seat, listening only to rain soften into dawn mist. 2 nights, too many echoes, and I know retreat is impossible. The tape anticipates. Curiosity is no longer choice. It has teeth, and I am walking willingly into its bite. The desk is crowded with reels, cassettes, scattered notes across pages I can hardly keep straight. Coffee rings mark sheets filled with numbers, arrows, sketches of waveforms. I whisper observations into the recorder, cataloging methodically, trying to keep investigative cadence steady. But tonight, something wrong emerges from playback, subtle at first. Background hiss thickens. Within it, faint syllables edge forward, not anonymous, not unknown. My words, exact phrases I recognize from earlier nights. I shudder, breath caught in chest. I scroll timestamps, confirm against notes. A segment logged yesterday now appears half buried in tonight's capture, words stammered into existence twice. At first staggered, then overlapping. Out of order. I pause playback, rewind, lean in close through headphones. The voice is undeniably mine, but scrambled, sliced, spliced. I whisper into current session. The tape feeds itself with me. Saying it aloud makes stomach pitch, as if ground bent beneath. I sit frozen, palms pressed to thighs. My pen dangles uselessly. Part of me longs to dismiss this as technical recursion equipment glitch, bleed from backup hard drives. Yet I know the flow too well. These are segments of narration never routed through analyzer before. I check every cable, each deck's routing. No feedback loop exists. Yet still the scrambled mirror persists, copying me in wrong sequence. Fragments spill, words about the technician's card. Then later notes on the Dallas Plaza, jumbled as if chapters rewritten by static. One statement cuts clear, my own voice whispering, "This isn't history." I slam spacebar, halting. My pulse pounds hot at temples. Those words I have not yet spoken on this recording, only in thought minutes earlier. The timeline bends that I cannot keep this secret alone. I dial my ally in telecom preservation. The line clicks, long delay, then their exhausted voice responds. I describe observations, careful but urgent, my narration returning embedded inside signal, displaced in time. Silence holds heavy on other end. At last they mutter low, tone steadying. During Cold War, something similar surfaced. Countermeasure sweep logs showed interceptors repeating operators' own phrases. Recorded but denied. Running feedback cycle. Then buried deep. Their words hurry harder, like speaking them is risk. I press for details. Was it ever explained? They sigh, not properly. Official lying was bleed from miswired loops. But text new bleed doesn't anticipate. Bleed doesn't reshuffle chronology. Their breathing strains. I hear noise scratch across line, deep hum flooding. It's happening again, isn't it? They whisper. The call jitters, slicing off half syllables. I shout their name, but response fractures, broken midstream. Then cut, dead air. My reflection hovers in black phone screen. I slam receiver down, heart hollow, room hum intensifies. Rain lashes outside, gutter overflow moaning against curb. Meters on analyzer twitch, though tape heads idle in silence. I whisper to recorder, desperate. It's happening again. The signal folds my present into its archive. There is no comfort left in rationalizing. Each night bleeds deeper, that I begin to wonder if real time even exists here anymore, or if I already dwell inside recorded loop. I lean my head against desk, listening. The rain hiss outside beats cycle on glass. Inside headphones, same hiss sinks uncanny, double heartbeat closing around me. I realize the midpoint has broken. This work is not about unearthing past. It is about surviving continuity collapse. Still, compulsion conquers fear. I dig another cassette free, hit record, narrate raw. Tonight closes like loop. Whatever this system is, it's rewriting order. I can't tell which part belongs to history, which to forecast. My voice sounds detached, like speaking through glass wall. The tension winds close, heavy across chest, pulling skin tight. Laptop fan roars. My pen scratches incoherent spirals rather than language. I continue. Names, dates, 'cause they mean nothing if narration itself can't keep line from folding. I have no end. Only the moment. The tape jerks violently forward without my touch, playhead screaming red. Through speakers emerges my own tone, panicked, whispering one phrase. I cannot tell what's live anymore. Only then do I understand the loop has overtaken me, that the phone on my desk has become an enemy. Its plastic shell hums faintly when idle, a breath just beneath the surface. Each time I lift the receiver, static greets me first, not signal. The line is no longer clean. It crawls with grain, rattling like loose screws in copper pipe. Tonight the interference erupts more violently than before, loud enough that I hold the receiver away from my ear. Then, inevitability. Voices. Not one, but fragments layered, different accents, strangers speaking snippets out of sync. None belong to the number dialed. It is as if new participants enter conversation without invitation, and no one alerts them they are trespassing. I ready the recorder. Red light steady, microphone angled toward phone. My voice shakes, but I continue narrating. Crosstalk, not bleed. The lines are carrying multiple channels at once. Highly deliberate insertion. I dial my own number, only intending to test voicemail. Ring, ring, then an abrupt cutoff not followed by greeting tone. Instead, background noise rushes forth in a wave. I close my eyes, focusing. It sounds like a crowd, compressed as though funneled through narrow pipe. Mutters, coughs, shifting bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder. Boots striking ground, rhythm building. Then one pop cracks far off. A sharp retort swallowed quickly. My whole body jerks. Heart hammers against ribs. Knuckles ache from gripping receiver until bone strains. I whisper this visceral panic into recorder, words pacing short and clipped. Voicemail replaced by memory. It is crowd noise, boots, gunfire echoing faint. I cannot tell where sound originates, but it plays unbroken, not even wavering when I switch handsets. My legs tremble against chair legs, the sensation of having phantoms in the room disguised as calls. Then, in the midst of this crowd bed, I catch a familiar tone. The voice of my ally. Their measured cadence slices brief through chaos, calm but urgent. If the patterns align like that, then cut. Abrupt silence mid-syllable as though blade fell across line. No continuation. No possibility of mistake. My hand flies cold to switch hook, pressing down, releasing, redialing. Every attempt greets me with distortion, strange whispers, mechanical gasps posed as conversation. My ally is gone as though they were never there. Only interference remains. Grinning empty dot, I pace hard from desk to wall and back, words spilling uncontrolled into microphone. This is not intercept. This is hijacking. Entire channels replaced in real time. Content erased, overwritten. Identity consumed. My pulse runs wild. Muscles twitch across shoulders like I am bracing for impact that does not arrive. The deeper truth claws at me. If voices can be placed so easily, then removal is effortless too. Nothing I say online is safe. Every call may already be history edited before spoken. The floor vibrates faint under my feet, though no train passes nearby. Phone still pressed to my ear sputters, static drums low like heartbeat unmoored. I yank cord free from wall. Yet hum persists, faint on line as though wire still bites into current long severed. I stare at plug in hand. Silence should rule. Instead, faint whispers leak from receiver left dangling on table. Impossible, but steady. I swallow a surge of fear bitter at back of throat. Then I circle recorder, bend low, and commit aloud. If the line itself is crossed, then it has pulled me automatically. No defense left but documentation. If it stares through my channels, then I stare back. My words fall raw, more vow than analysis. The crowd noise oozes weak now, dissipating into clicks and lingering pops. Then gone. The receiver rests quiet once again. For minutes I stand immobilized, dizziness breaking orientation. My notes lay scattered, pen rolled to floor. But eventually, momentum pushes back in. Adrenaline demanding record kept living. I whisper into microphone despite cracked lips. They hijacked call to myself. They borrowed my ally's tone, inserted it, then cut it away. Proves access runs deeper than simple archive. They can intrude mid-breath, mid-syllable. Redacting in real time. Each phrase dragged like confession, but the act steadies me. The rain outside hammers glass. Heavy storm now catching metal edges of fire escape. The sound joins phone hiss into single chorus. I imagine frequency, like water invasive through every gap and brick. Uncontainable. I wipe condensation from window with sleeve, confirming no trespasser stands waiting. Only street, washed bare of movement. Metronome rain sets pulse to my terror. I sit again, pushing sweat from face with unsteady palm. I lean forward into recorder, whisper near edge of collapse. If the line is crossed, then so am I. Whatever threshold defended me before is irrelevant now. My voice belongs half here, half where they keep every stolen echo. The words fall ragged, heavy and final. And in listening back, even as storm thrashes, I catch faint copy. Whisper layered just one step ahead of me, already claiming next moment. Before I speak a dot, I set up the broadcast rig with hands that would not stop trembling. The table was cluttered with wires, adapters, and hastily drawn diagrams in pencil that made less sense the longer I stared at them. I told myself this would be simple. A test of tone injection, nothing radical. Feed a clean oscillator into the interference. Give it something to contest, something to drive the parasite backward. My own improvised firewall. The night outside roared with rain, sheets striking the fire escape in rattles that seemed to approve or threaten. I described every detail into recorder, so no step went undocumented. The antenna sat angled near the window frame, its telescoping body leaning toward black clouds as if sniffing for static. Grounding cable soldered to radiator. Oscillator dialed low, sine wave clean at first, nothing exotic. My voice faltered only slightly while narrating. Signal carrier ready. Injection frequency set. I paused, breath-clenching chest. Rain hammered harder, dripping from gutter onto antenna casing with tinny metallic cadence. Authenticity, I reminded myself, is proof. Even of failure, I thumbed switch. Oscillator bled tone into system, joining loops I had tuned across days. At first a simple hum filled speakers, calm and level, like tuning fork ring. Relief slid across me. It worked. But seconds later, the response arrived. An answering shriek so violent it tore through cones with metallic scream. The sound of sheet steel ripped by invisible claws. I yanked volume down, but shriek climbed higher, not volume dependent, as if originating from walls themselves. My notes smeared with sweat and spilled ink as I scrambled to log what erupted against me. Neighbors began pounding. One fist thudded against wall in furious rhythm. Another slammed above, muffled curses soaking through ceiling. Their lives had been invaded by my experiment without warning. My guilt warred with terror. I staggered toward power strip. Before I could reach it, lights across apartment flickered bright, then black, then bright again, synchronized pulses tied exactly to scream. Like the building itself chorusing reply. No ordinary surge. Whole grid bent in time with my broadcast. I forced myself to narrate, even as lungs seized tight. Unexpected return. Tone injection reversed. Speakers shriek beyond mechanical range. Environment in sync. My words came clipped, gasped. I reached cord at last, ripped plug from socket. Silence barely arrived. Some shriek continued long enough to defy power. Then, with abruptness more frightening, all sound dropped at once. Smoke curled from back of amplifier. Acrid twist of melted wire insulation. My stomach lurched at sight. Oscillator dead, indicator lamp extinguished. Circuits fried crisp. I waved smoke aside, coughing, lungs burning with chemical tang. My hands shook violent as I set notebook flat again. Pen scratched crooked across page. Experiment failure, response hostile. Neighbors pounding dwindled into silence. My heart still pounded heavy though. I sat back in chair, staring at crippled gear. It was never meant to be resisted mechanically. The thought burst sharp, half despair, half dark clarity. As though all my training, all my circuits and cables, were child's sketches against force too deeply woven into world's fabric. Perhaps the broadcast was not intrusion at all, but native, place-sown. My attempt had been rebellion against architecture of time itself. Pain swelled behind eyes, throbbing. Yet inside that pain a harder edge formed. Resolve. I whispered hoarse into recorder, voice scorched by chemical air. Tonight confirms physical resistance, not option. They cannot be challenged by our machines. But I will not stop entry. Obsession demands push further. If tone collapses circuits, then signal strength undeniable. That only proves chase must deepen. The equipment hissed faint, cooling, wounded. Rain dulled against window, rhythm slowing as storm eased, giving room for silence to stretch. But silence was not true. As I tilted my head, faint echo pulsed from speaker box, though it was powerless, coil blackened. A tiny vibration mocking, like voice too thin to parse, yet full of intent. Returning answer to my reckless attempt. I leaned in, breath half gone, whisper scraped raw. It's replying. And in that instant I knew failure did not halt pursuit, but sharpen it. From smoke and ruin, something unseen had heard me clearly enough to laugh. The wreckage of the failed broadcast still clutters my desk, melted wire insulation. Scorched amplifier casing twisted open like ribs. I have not cleared it. I want it there, a mute reminder of limits I cannot cross. But something crueler arrived since then. Not shriek, not overload, not flicker. Silence. At first I welcomed it, half hoping interference had finally died. But the relief soured when I realized silence was deliberate. My microphone, once alive with hiss and hum, now records nothing. Levels that should idle at minus 60 decibels hold flat-lined as if clipped clean. The noise floor itself has been erased. Artificial quiet, the cruelest possible sabotage, because I built trust in the imperfections of tape. Proof lives in the dirt, not in sterile absence. And now the dirt is missing. I paced the apartment, recorder running constantly, mic hunting near window frames, along pipes where rhythm once lived. Rain sluiced outside, steady background like always. Yet playback returned vacuum. As if city outside, storm included, had shut mouth and held breath. My own voice came through clear enough, but between syllables spread gulfs of void. Nothing to hide behind, no evidence to underline me. Just empty. I pressed closer against radiator, once my strongest conductor. Nothing. Cabinet hum that should never vanish had been stripped. I thumped wall, clanged spoon against pipe, replayed my strike, vanished to stillness. The recorder captured only my strained breathing. I muttered, agitated, hardest words slamming into vacancy. I wanted it to fight back with the metronome I had cursed nights before. But it withheld even resistance. The silence mocked. Hours stretched. Notebook lines filled with single useless notation. Empty. Empty. I scratched ink until pen tore holes through wet page, hands slick with frustration. At moments I wondered if I'd already gone deaf, that shriek of broadcast frying inner ear without my knowledge. But no, I still heard street sounds faint in live air, passing car, trickle of drainage, hiss from fridge. My senses remained. Silence thrived only once transduced onto tape. The theft had focus, intent, strategy. I whispered into mic, voice cracking. They cut proof away. They know where I look. The admission burned throat. Without artifact, I was storyteller trading in ghosts. I clenched teeth until jaw ached. Around the room, equipment sat neutered. Dead as ornaments. I paced stripes into carpet, hours folding, rain drumming on. Then, deepest in frustration, I left recorder running and collapsed in chair. Head dropped, fatigue washing me thin. I dozed without meaning to, the kind of broken half-sleep where body jerks awake. When it happened again, I dragged recorder close and pressed play, willing yet another blank tape. At first, I heard only expected void. My own mutters, then long swaths of nothingness. But halfway through file, something intruded. A crack in ice. One sound too real to ignore. A single intake of breath, sharp and alive, nowhere near microphone placement, nowhere belonging to me. I gasped so intense it overrides tape, my shock documented live. Pulse raced. Hair shot up right across arms as though electric. In replay loop, I confirmed it over and over. Not mine. My breathing had slowed in, drowse, shallow and rhythmic. This intruder was sudden, deep and urgent. Someone or something had inhaled just inches from mouth of my recorder. Silence had hidden it, then failed. Shivers crawled spine. I leaned hands against desk to steady legs quaking. I whispered raw commentary, desperate to anchor experience. The silence was weapon. But it slipped. They left a breath behind. My voice cracked at memory of that short audio tooth biting through void. The silence, I realized, was cruelty. A tactic meant to starve me of signs. To make me chase absence until obsession folded in on itself. But in starving me fully, it betrayed presence. Something alive enough to breathe had forgotten itself for 1/2 second. I sat with discovery like ember cupped in cold hands. Fragile, glowing, proof nonetheless. Thin, Yes, but truer because it pierced through what sought disguise. Every artifact I had chased before could be rationalized as bleed, malfunction, accident. Silence plus a breath could not. You cannot accidentally unmake the world and then accidentally inhale. Outside thunder rolled off distant horizon. Thin light tried through curtain edges. I felt night's weight lifting, but not mercy. Notebook page filled with new single word at last. Breath. I slumped there whispering final confession into mic. They starved me of all noise, but not completely. They left enough. Enough to drive on. I was shaking, nerves stretched raw, but steel flickered in me again. The silence proved worse than shriek, yet even that failed to erase. Somewhere the signal still survived, mocking me softly, promising new returns. My recorder word, head faintly warm. Apartment still tomb quiet between words. But I clutched truth tighter than ever. The silence had not been complete. It could never be complete. Something always remains, enough to keep me pressing forward, whether I will it or not. The parking structure smelled of oil and damp concrete, every echo magnified, every step ringing twice as loud as it should. I arrived early, circling until I found a shadowed corner on the third level. Engines idled in distance, their reverberations ricocheting across pillars and ceiling. A syncopated pulse that reminded me of heartbeats under magnification. I kept the recorder close, clipping the mic discreetly against my jacket seam. Light flickered from tired fluorescent tubes, buzzing faint like they too carried the same frequency that wouldn't leave me alone. My ally's car pulled in 10 minutes later, headlights sliding briefly across beams before winking out. The slam of a door rang out like a gunshot in the hollow chamber. They walked quickly, collar turned up, eyes unfixed from mine until they drew close enough to speak low. Their first words arrived hoarse, caution drawn taut. The reports weren't lost. They were buried. Every muscle tightened as they pressed a thin folder into my hands. Photocopied sheets inside, the ink faint and gray at edges, as though unwilling to survive passage. I flipped pages under dim light. Phrases leapt out, violent bursts on emergency bands. Aligned timestamps. Each noted occurrence traced exactly alongside the motorcade's route that day. Proof, seared into routine documentation, then sealed away from daylight. My ally whispered faster, pressured by the space itself. These were stored offsite, mislabeled as financials. Deliberately filed wrong so no one would stumble onto them. I steadied breath, raising recorders subtly so their voice was captured alongside mine. Pages trembled where my grip failed to remain steady. Reading, I felt the same sensation as when the spectrogram showed map of Dallas. Recognition too sharp to deny, too jagged to comfort. If even official logs testified to violent intrusions, then the interference is not myth or paranoia, but documented fact. Sprawled bureaucracy bore the wound, had chosen to veil it. I hesitated before Mike, half afraid engraving their words would mark me for erasure too. The recorder weighed heavy. The air in the structure pressed closer. I whispered anyway, voice rough. Evidence is real, but risk escalates with every line. My ally's eyes darted toward stairwell. They nodded once, curt, as if to say we are already past return. Then it happened. Echoing off concrete, abrupt and shrilling, a car alarm detonated into the hollow space. Not from either of our vehicles. A lonely sedan 2 rows away flashed lights violently, horn blaring in mechanized panic. We both flinched hard. The timing was too cruel to pass as random. The sound rang layered with interference, unnatural resonance buzzing every pane of glass in the garage. I clutched recorder tighter and logged breathless words. Unprompted alarm. Bending machines again. They know even this meeting. For seconds we stood paralyzed, each horn blast striking through marrow. Then my ally broke trance, stepping back quickly, gesturing sharp. We should go. Right now. their tone sharper than I'd ever heard. The folder remained pressed against me as though branding. I tucked it under jacket, heart pacing double with alarm's rhythm. Every limb fought urge to run. We parted without farewell, just two shadows scattering to opposite ends of a cavernous hall filled with electronic shrieks. By the time I reached my car, hands shook so violently I dropped keys once, the scrape loud against concrete. Alarm still howled through air, unbroken. I forced myself behind wheel, slammed door, engine coughing alive. My chest stung with pressure. Driving down tight ramps, I whispered raw in the recorder, breath jagged between syllables. Evidence exists. Burst records, bands aligned, route mirrored. Buried on purpose. Pulled out at cost. The leak burns every hand that keeps it. Tires screeched as I cut corner too fast. The alarm followed me down levels, echoing until distance swallowed it. But the frequency felt inside skull long after dot when at last I hit open street. Rain slick beneath tires and sodium lamps sickly on hood. I realized holding copy of truth did not steady me. It seared hotter, dangerous weight, pressing harder than ignorance ever did. Proof had surfaced. But no one here escapes clean. Its resonance corrupts all who keep it. Even me. I have not slept properly in days. My apartment smells of burned circuit boards and stale coffee, the air heavy, saturated with static memory. Every surface is slicked with notes, real boxes stacked in messy towers, notebooks filled with calculations that blur into each other. Yet I cannot stop reviewing. I sit at console night after night, headphones clamped until ears ache, replaying, realigning, pushing fragments into order. The bursts I caught outside relay stations are no longer isolated. Layer them just right, and they reveal something else, something long buried in the hum. I run the sequences again, aligning peaks with obsessive care. Rain drizzles against glass outside, streaking lines and faint glisten like sheet music, complying with signals inside. I drag cursor along, stack 3 nights' worth on one axis, then 5. The surges rise, fingerprints once scattered. Now synchronized, they build an unmistakable pattern, a sweeping tone climbing and dropping across spectrum with military precision. My stomach lurches. I know this shape. I'd logged similar forms in obsolete manuals, Cold War experiments with radar sweep patterns across hostile sky. Only here it is not situational awareness. It narrows too clean, homes in too exact. My throat dries as I lean forward, whispering notes sharp for recorder. It is radar sweep signature, but not probing. It is pointing, targeted tone. The more I play back, the worse it feels. In war manuals, perspective was outward, scanning external. Here it bends inward. Reverse telescope focused tight on one place, one path. Aligned against motorcade route, my earlier logs match. The sweep wasn't watching. It was measuring, shiver rake spine. The thought presses obscene. Targeting implies orchestration. Not random interference, not stray bleed. Someone conducted the assassination environment by frequencies. A lattice of sound-guiding bullets or events invisible to crowds' eyes. I struggle to breathe through recognition. Outside, rain intensifies. Pelting window with such measured rhythm, I can no longer believe a chance. Every splash syncs almost musically with sweep pattern echoing in headphones. I mutter uneasy. Even weather feels staged, threat in same loom. Notes scribbled on pad turn illegible from sweat blurring ink. Hours slip. I fixate deeper, repeating cycles, dragging evidence until brain buzzes with harmonic residue. Whisper again to recorder, tone cracked by fear. This is not echo confined to Dallas. It propagates across years. Spread wide. An audience spanning decades, every listener unwilling but included. My bones chill. Listening itself feels participation, an active joining system too broad to escape. If you tune at all, you're inside radius already. I take headphones off, ears still filled by phantom sweep. Silence does not return. Memory plays simulation louder than machine. Fridge compressor turns hum into matching arc. Nearest lamppost outside buzzes in halftime sync. I try to fumble phone, press record again, but hand cramps around device. All environment now pulses like it has been quietly absorbed by targeted tone. Press to console, I whisper low, almost apology. To hear is to belong to audience. Audience not human, not chosen. You hear. You enter. The sentence falters into shiver. I return gaze to screen where graph still runs in repetitions. I realize confrontation approaches whether wanted or not. If this sweep extends across time, collapsing past into present, then by documenting it, I have already crossed threshold, nearly dawn. Rain slowing at last, pattering intermittent. But impression of orchestration will never leave. My final mutter spills raw, voice trembling steady into red light. If you can hear this, you already sit inside its radius. That phrase marks point of no return. Confrontation is coming. My body knows momentum is beyond halt now. The stairwell smelled of mildew and locked in dust. Concrete steps curved down into stale air where fluorescent tubes hummed reluctant, flickering slow like tired shutters. The university had granted me after-hours clearance, but no one else waited in these halls. My shoes echoed hollow against stone, bouncing from steel doors. The further I went, the more it felt less like storage and more like crypt. At bottom, a rusted push bar opened into the archive basement. The room yawned wide, filled with metal racks leaning under the weight of cardboard boxes. Real canisters stacked in uneven towers, papers curled by damp. Breathing here carried grit, fragments of forgotten years coating lips and tongue. One tube overhead blinked insistently, throwing me in and out of shadow with each pulse of light. I set recorder down careful, red light steady, describing environment between breaths. Archive basement. Boxes cataloged poorly. Materials scattered and uncared for. Papers slipped beneath boots with dry whispers as I stepped deeper. Rows bled into rows. Each cradle filled with unmarked reels, the spines faded to near blank. Penciled notes flaked into silence when touched. My heart thudded hard as I ran hand over canister labeled only with date and call letters. A news broadcast feed. I threaded reel onto portable deck, perched on crate, cables tight against adapter. I slipped headphones across ears, bracing for nothing but voice warped by years of neglect. Instead, alignment struck too perfect. The reel played, announcer strained, describing Dallas chaos in broken cadence. Underneath, my analyzer laptop captured spectral graph, and the fingerprints I had seen night after night aligned without error. Peaks curved exact, timing drilled straight through. My stomach sank, pressed heavy with recognition. "It's identical," I whispered, words trembling on tape. Bursts lining to my own captures. Preserved not by accident, but encoded here. The vibration grew almost immediately. Not inside gear, but the room itself. Air trembled, low resonance seeping into ribs. Box stacks rattled faint, shifting like teeth under pressure. The rows of racks began to hum as if struck with tuning forks. My breath shortened, chest compressing tight, eardrums pinched until pitch blurred internal. I pulled foam from one ear to confirm environment alone carried rhythm. It did. The basement had become instrument. Fluorescent above jittered violent, strobing light against dust clouds, swirling faint. For seconds, the bulbs whined in harmony with real static signature. I staggered backward, headphone cable dragging taut. My pulse strained to keep rhythm. Hands shook as I continued narrating. The signal breeds inside medium itself. Not preserved like artifact, but alive, transmitting across decades through plastic and oxide. My tongue felt metallic. As if I had bitten into copper dye, every rack groaned soft, as though weight shifted under unseen wind. Papers stirred at my feet without draft. Sweat sheeted cold down spine. The longer I listened, the heavier air pressed, like atmosphere cranked high inside sealed chamber. My knees buckled once, but I caught myself on crate edge, knuckles white, nails scraping metal. For half moment, vision bent, corners of room curving outward as though stretched by sound. I forced headphones off. Relief should have come, but hum remained, naked and surrounding, earless but present. Removing equipment changed nothing. The reel continued spinning. Each revolution made racks shiver gently. It was no longer inside recorder machinery, had become irrelevant. The broadcast itself rattled through air like ghost specter insisting its place. I steadied recorder against chest to keep voice from cracking. Not just content. These materials generate resonance themselves. Memory fuses with medium until one is indistinguishable. To collect is not safe. Listening is participation. I realized with cold dread that these archives were not storage. They were incubation. Ears throbbed with swelling pressure, inner canals flexing until nausea rose. Light strobed faster, pain prickling across scalp as hair lifted with static buildup. I crouched, vision dimming around edges, whispering into microphone even as breath fought to stay. I may lose consciousness, but recording must continue. I clutched reel deck switch with trembling fingers, slowing playback till wheels ticked halt. The hum persisted 5 beats beyond silence, then tapered back like mocking laughter. I staggered upright, one hand on rack edge to steady vertigo. Muscles cramped with aftermath. When at last fluorescent calmed and air thinned lighter, I shoved reel back into canister, clamping lid as though shackling beast. Folder pages shuffled in corner though untouched, arching upward, then settling flat. I dared not touch them. Ascending stairwell stole strength from legs, each step dragging, ears still ringing faint tone that refused cessation. By time door hinge screamed back into first floor corridor, I breathed like I had surfaced from water far too deep. The university hallways above looked clean and empty, but weight of basement clung still, shadowing vision. Cramming lungs, into recorder I confessed raw against pounding heart. Signals preserved in media are not inert. They breed. They alter environment. Memory and medium inseparable from now on. To encounter one is to invite both. Danger tangible, expanding. My throat scraped dry as rain outside started again. Faint drip against window panes high above basement levels. I tightened jacket around arms, though heat still clung heavy. I walked into night shaken enough to lose sense of direction, but one truth bore steady. I could not separate event from recording anymore. Space and time now looped in each transmission, binding reel to body, cassette to bone. And nothing would let go. It started subtle, like a trick of attention. I checked my scanners one night and realized the narrow bands I had followed religiously were no longer alone. The interference I'd heard for months bled wider. Charts showed low peaks where static should ride flat. FM bands, once clean with music stations, warbled faint undercurrents. I leaned in, ears straining through headphones. Beneath ordinary broadcasts lay the familiar pulse, the tone sweep I had cataloged. Now hiding inside songs, inside commercials, inside late-night talk callers who never noticed they carried a parasite with them. I pulled headset off, rubbed temples raw, then routed new test through analyzer. Cellular chatter bled across graphs, every call squirming with spikes I knew too well. I froze, palms sweaty on desk. Even Wi-Fi routers at my own home emitted rhythmic pulse, faint but measurable, embedded into handshake packets usually invisible to human sense. Each beat matched my tapes. The scope terrified me. No more narrow hunt. The signal had gone wideband. It was in everything. I spoke into recorder, voice shaking despite effort. Penetration, total. FM compromised. Cellular compromised. Local digital compromised. Scope beyond monitoring. Growth appears exponential. My mouth dried further with each phrase. I watched phone buzz near elbow, notification light blinking, but I dared not pick it up. Incoming voices had become too suspect. Attempting contact with friend confirmed worst fears. I dialed number, heart already braced. At first, familiar tone. Then glitch. Call dissolved into layered echoes, repeated words offset by half-second. I begged friend to confirm hearing me, but their reply fractured, shivering. Repeating syllables from earlier minutes of call, spliced into nonsense, until line died with electronic groan. My palm trembled violently as I lowered handset. The line hadn't failed from distance. It was overwritten real-time by presence I could not confront. I panned mic toward kitchen with desperation, needing neutral proof. The refrigerator compressor drummed constant, a hum I had never noticed until it shivered in perfect sync with logged pulses. The pulse responded, matching every throb of machine's heart. The mundane object of daily life now echoed archive bleed. I leaned forehead against wall, whispering, even appliances draw cadence now. Entire world saturated. I sat back wary at desk, eyes wide, narrating through teeth. This is encroachment. The environment no longer a stage of accidents. It submits. The line between history and present shredded. My breath hitched, turning shallow. The realization gnawed deeper. Maybe the assassination had not planted signal, but merely triggered its bloom. A detonation into time itself. I pressed this thought to recorder, voice raw. Not seed, trigger. The broadcast was catalyst, coaxing something already here to claim air, memory, architecture. Headphones slid heavy against collarbone as I slumped. Body trembled with impossible clarity. If this spread widened without stop, every human frequency would become archived before long. Every event would overwrite itself. Every moment would replay unseen. I checked Wi-Fi again, router lights blinking frantic, though no devices ran upstream traffic. Each blink a pulse. I yanked plug. For 10 seconds silence held, blissful dripping quiet. Then faint throbs still sounded, as though router continued on phantom current. My stomach folded. Disconnection didn't matter. Once infected, system carried its own continuity. I whispered softer still, hair plastered damp to temples from sweat. The world itself is turning into medium. Every channel compromised. I thought of basement reels breeding resonance, how physical tape shook racks alive. Now broadcast itself fused to air in similar manner. No division left. The future was archive, the present was archive, woven one into the other until none of us knew which line we walked. Fear did not kill resolve though. It hardened into steel, forged by desperation. I muttered with clenched teeth. If spread exponential, only closer to source offers rescue. Must trace route before wideband demolishes chance at truth entirely. The decision carved itself without permission. Forward momentum would carry me into nests I'd once shunned. Still, all lingered heavy. My voice faltered as I spoke to recorder again. Spectacle undeniable, but dread louder. This is no hobbyist transmission. It is organism-consuming spectrum. I replayed last scan and listening hurt. Static wound into high keening, voice resemblance too near to ignore. My chest hollowed, lightning cracked sky outside, thunder rattling panes. On cue my analyzer spiked, graphs blooming with tall ridges, lines snapping erect. Storm energies themselves bent into cadence. I could no longer tell if weather-shaped signal or signal-shaped weather, only that both moved together. Window shook. I whispered broken prayer under breath, held recorder close to ribs. Each noise around me confirmed infiltration, the click of thermostat. Spin of fan, drip of faucet, all sliding into sequences matching spectrogram ridges. Each common hum now documented betrayal. My knuckles went bone-white. Sweat beaded under nails. I whispered through clenched mouth. It has overtaken too much. My role is written now. I must dive further. The fear felt like drowning, lungs full, but compulsion pressed deeper. No apparatus safe now. Landlines gone, FM stations gone, routers leaking bleed into urban veins. What remained untouched? I searched but no answer. Nothing. I ended session crouched at console, staring at blinking lights across a room full of enslaved machines. My mutter rasped raw yet final. If you hear this tone, you're already consumed. The radius is not around Dallas anymore. It never was. My whole body trembled, whisper rising ragged. Every voice belongs now unless I reach source. And soon it will be too late. Afternoon rain slicked the bricks of Dealey Plaza, dripping steady from each ledge and gutter as I stepped out of the car with scanner clutched tight under jacket. The air smelled metallic, drenched pavement reflecting blurred neon from street lamps that had flickered on too early. Tourists dotted the open expanse, umbrellas raised, children tugging parents' coats. Their chatter was light, ordinary. None of them carried what throbbed relentlessly inside my ears, the wide band pulse that had followed me for nights without sleep. I tuned scanner low, careful, antenna jabbing rain as it unfolded. Instantly the readouts surged, false peaks climbing faster than I could log. Meters red line before calibration could settle, lights jerking frantic. Lampposts around me buzzed audibly, not from loose fixtures, but from resonance, vibrating like struck tuning forks. Each pole carried its own voice, wavering metallic. I narrated into handheld recorder in broken gasps. Plaza reverberates like instrument. Poles buzzing. Street grates humming. I slipped further inward. Cars sloshed along slick roads, tourists oblivious, hands raising cameras toward brick facade fixed forever in history. A guide's voice cracked through megaphone in distance, recounting sanitized lines. Yet overlaying all narration was layered song of interference, cages of sound colliding. I crouched beneath the underpass where once motorcades sped. The hum thickened, almost liquid, rolling through concrete around me. My ribs pressed shallow as atmosphere grew charged, chest sensed to sickening rhythm of tone. Rainwater pooled along curb, ripples trembling as if struck by invisible fingers. I trained mic toward it, knees soaked against stone, whispering through throat tight. Water's surface vibrates in time. The plaza itself broadcast in multifold. My screen filled with waveforms stacked in violent bloom, distorted arcs bending taller than equipment should contain. Headphones blasted faint keening even at lowest setting, forcing me to rip one ear free. Tourists passed close above, one child pointing down beneath underpass where I crouched with gear. Their laughter carried harmless, unaware. But then the sound warped against pillars, stretched long until their laughter replayed delayed, as if different years echo transposed. Time drift thickened here. 63 concealed within 2025, skin of 1 year slipping onto another. My head reeled dizzy at sensation. I pressed recorder to chest, voice cracking louder now. All years blend. Distinctions erased. Crowd noise replicates historic time. My pulse slammed faster than I could word. Fingertips numbed, shaking. Equipment screamed against limiters, needles frozen in red. Even with gear tuned down, collapse loomed near. The more I spoke, the clearer claustrophobia tightened. Soundscape responded, volume curling upward when narration peaked, quieting if I went silent. The plaza wasn't just resonance chamber. It was collaborator. My voice no longer anchored recording, it became ingredient. I said into my chorus, the session is no longer mine. Recording belongs to signal. Stripped of control. Drops from ceiling of underpass landed heavy against tape deck. Each strike accent amplified unnatural, each splash reverberating as separate note. For seconds, the water itself formed percussion line impossible for rain alone. I bit teeth tight to ground myself. Breath came ragged, chest constricted as if barometric pressure crushed margin of survival. Rain continues blunt against empty air. No cadence now, no synchronized pulse, yet each drop still strikes nerve like prophecy. Perhaps the silence is only camouflage, the longer interval before next pattern resumes. I steel myself against hopeless thought. If so, then someone else will encounter it. Nothing dies inside wires. Everything waits. Voice shifts uncertain, timbre sliding duller as if distance widens even within sentence. Listening is never passive, I whisper at length, letting each word sink heavy into tape. To open ear is to surrender part. I joined Radius the second I pressed play. You will too, if you hear. I scan room one last time before leaving it to ruin. Gear is inert, but recorder runs with steady glow. Chairs overturned from scramble, table burned deep charcoal in one spot. Memory of that chorus remains valiant behind eyes, more present than furniture. Raindrops persist, black screen stretched long across windows of mind, unbroken. I drift closer to faint exhaustion. My last phrase falls unsteady, cracked but clear enough. Someone else will replay these tapes. Lightning forked far, but thunder landed directly in Plaza Disproportionate, monstrous in echo. Graphs spiked to unreadable saturation. Every year nested inside crash, hollowing me until I almost lost consciousness. I clutched ground, nails scraping moss-slick stone. My dry laughter slipped unbidden, hysteria at edge dot between gusts of static. I muttered vowel half choking. I anchor. Even if undone, I anchor. Sound swallowed words, twisting them until playback folded twice into same second. Breath clogged throat. I steadied myself enough to speak again, voice breaking to confession. This tipping point may erase line. Next hour may be last attempt. I keep microphone live, I won't break. If collapse claims me, it will claim me on record. The plaza pitched louder, tones stacking into chorus. Families drifted away unaware, but I knew they walked inside scaffold of humming decades, every movement carved against twin shadows. My arm cramped from holding recorder. My ears flamed from pulsed assault. Yet steel of resolve hardened in marrow. My jaw cramped but lips leaned to red light, whispering raw. This is collapse point. My voice no longer mine. But I give it anyway. Maybe last anchor left before everything folds. The table was crowded with every reel I had gathered, every cassette. Each fragment of hiss I had sworn to a machine in the dead hours. Tonight I would braid them together, align them until they no longer contradicted, but became single current. The desk stank of scorched circuits from my earlier failures, yet I set gear in order with hands steady enough to belie the dread spreading inside. Each deck clicked alive, wheels whining, meters glowing with orange fatigue. I balanced reels atop adapters that groaned in protest. Rain drummed glass like approving knuckles. I narrated as I patched signal flow, microphone tight to lips to log each step. Playback chain aligned. Inputs stacked, reels 1 through 4. Cassette firewall engaged. Scanner feed live. Oscillator sweeping as reference. Words shivered thin in my throat. I knew this was guarantee of rupture, maybe fatal. But I craved match point against presence that had pursued me through years blurred into one. When switch struck, every meter pinned full instantly. Speakers pulsed with violent throb, vibrating objects across shelves. Books tumbled, glasses rattled along counter, once silent walls trembling as if hollow. The interference no longer whispered in margins. It manifested full, a title chorus dragging every syllable from every decade I had studied, voices layered, chanting over each other an impossible counterpoint. I held breath, then forced voice through rising howl. The system is awake. Every era stitched into single cloth. This is no echo. This is entity. Sweat poured down temples as consoles heated, fans whining past safe octave. Feedback bent through air until metal lamp quivered. I coughed against dry smoke. Still I refused to stop narrating. I acknowledge risk of erasure. Yet session continues. Every frequency collapsed inward, folding loops where my own words played before I spoke them, echoing into tomorrow before throat caught breath. The trauma of feedback pounded skull, bone rattling, yet I clung to rhythm. And then it came, split-second clarity. Beneath scrape, beneath war cry of static, a sound too primal to dismiss heartbeat. Low, rhythmic, steady. Matching my own chest exactly, perfect lock. I gasped, stumbled back. Knees buckled. The heartbeat was not metaphorical anomaly. It was proof this system carried inhabitant. Maybe us, maybe accident. Maybe deliberate design spanning eras. But its pulse synchronized to mine. For flash instant I existed both here and inside wideband archive. Tears slid salt into mouth. I whispered, nearly swallowed by storm. It has always been alive. It belongs to us or we to it. Then alarm of phone split session. Allies number. I slammed receiver open, desperate tether. Their voice broke through, urgent, but half words drowned instantly beneath surge. I caught only fragments. If you, then obliterated by groaning wave. They shouted again, syllables torn like paper. Then silence. The line erased as if cut by blade. My console's casing rattled, bolts loosening under pressure. Signal surged beyond device capacity, frying input circuits, screens bleeding white. The sound thickened, frequency mass refusing collapse, pressing toward total. I pressed lips to recorder, chest hammering with doubled heartbeat. If this erases me, mark that I continued. Documenting until the end. My words dragged across roared distortion, torn, yet I poured breath hard enough to embed them. Heat curled across palms, deck smoking, plastic warping hot. Rain outside escalated to hammering, building joined chorus. The chorus amplified until I drowned in womb of noise. My lungs ached against crushing resonance. Yet obsession knotted stronger than fear. I shouted over flood. All reels aligned. All years entangled. Collapse is not theory, it is present. Sudden downdraft struck silence for one slice of a second. My heart froze. In void, only the synchronized heartbeat remained, pounding enormous inside head, adult but infant, something watching from unseen cradle. I whispered hoarse. It is aware. Then the tidal surge returned, louder, punitive, stripping final scraps of speech. I clawed microphone nearer, forced last vow onto tape. I remain until it silences me. Breath ripped raw from lungs. Equipment shrieked, snapping breakers, room trembling as though swallowed into resonance chamber far underground. And then erasure. Sound itself lunged forward, crushing my voice mid-breath, snuffing transmission without mercy. When the recorder clicks back alive, my voice no longer belongs entirely to me. It sounds warped, stretched through gauze like an old reel water, damaged and barely hanging to coherence. Each syllable drags sluggish, vowels blurred, consonants dull. I listen on playback and barely recognize the one speaking. And yet, it is all I have. So I keep narrating, even altered, as though voice had been copied once too many times until grain overlays became permanent. The apartment is silent, except for rain. But even rain is not crisp anymore. It barely drips against glass, muffled, reduced to hiss, like it too has been recorded, erased, dubbed over, replayed. The violent storm of feedback is gone. Every device lies charred, meters dark, knobs brittle with smoke. Cables hang limp across floor like veins emptied. Where once light blinked furious, only shadow remains now. I sit among remains that no longer hum, feeling strangeness of absolute calm. I force words spiteful against loss. Aftermath. Consoles burned through. Oscillator gone. Reels warped by heat. Attempt ended with erasure and silence reclaimed. Saying it aloud steadies me. Breath emerges slow, measured. Yet sweat still tracks spine. Phantom heat lingering even though air tempers cold. The silence feels performative, unnatural, as though held in cupped hands just beyond. I confess to recorder what gnaws me deepest. The signal went quiet, buried or absorbed, but I do not know where it will resurface. Absence proves nothing permanent. It retreats, waits, then returns through antenna, through pipe, through world. My throat scatters with hoarse whisper. The living moment inside storm, let my body not into conqueror, but conduit dot in half darkness. I glance at reels stacked around me, their plastic skins now scabbed with burn. I realize truth. Assassination itself no longer preserved in names or testimony. Its memory thrives inside machines that carried shock ripple long after. Magnified static, pulses of electromagnetic fear, notes encoded on spools makers never intended to last. History is not paper. History is hiss. I lean forward, head tipped low, whispering to red light that still stares, unwavering. Kennedy's death is recalled not by living, but by circuits. Every hum since repeats it. We believe photographs tell story, but it is tone, layers of bleed, devices restless that sustain. The dirty smell of fried copper diffuses still. Tang licks my nostrils. I choke but refuse to stop. The line between grief and duty has collapsed fully. I am both mourner and archivist, prisoner and witness. I pause long, listen for phantom. Meter hovers at 0, microphone dragging in only soft rasp of rainfall. But suspicion will not leave. Every whisper of drainage I hear is tremor of return. My pulse steadies, then flutters when window pane moans with gust. Was it natural? Or notes slipped back in? I admit personal wound into tape, voice breaking. My grief was start. Father lost faith in world, ears bent to noise. I swore not to inherit. Yet I sit here, ash-rimmed, circuits dead, whispering same confessions he once whispered. Grief provided opening. Signal walked through it. I carry both stains now, blurred inseparable. Words taste metallic. I clutch desk edge harder until nails ache.